Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. This is the official CFL Week 1 preview show, but we'll also talk a little UFL. It is the semifinals in the United Football League taking place this weekend. We'll drop a couple opinions on those games at the end of the show as well, but primarily CFL will be the focus. Ian Cameron, joined once again by Will Arndt, my good buddy here with me on the show, who joined me a couple of times last year. Will was with me here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Will, it's good to see you again. Just before we get into the CFL stuff, just give everyone a little update. How's Will Arndt and things in the life of Will Arndt these days?
Yeah, it's good. So good to see everybody again, and I'm excited to talk sports. It's no matter what we got going on in our lives, sports are a great escape and rallying cause. So always enjoyed the element of sports and what it does for people. So excited to talk some sports with you, and everything's good on my end. Staying busy, but between projects right now, so nothing too exciting to share with everybody at the moment. But always, have my eyes in and around the pro football landscape. So stay tuned on that.
And plus, he's been working with instructionals too, and helping younger people out. Working with them. I see the social media videos that you put out there. You're working with the younger kids and helping them out. So that's great stuff indeed that you're doing that. So that's keeping you busy, I'm sure, a little bit as well. Let's get into CFL. It's a great, exciting season ahead. I think there's a lot of parity in this league, Will, on paper coming into the season. You look at just overall, Montreal, the defending Grey Cup champions, the Alouettes, there's that thought process in my mind, Will, coming into the season where, okay, is this a great team that won the Grey Cup last year? Or did they just get red hot, down the stretch to get that Grey Cup championship? Because if you remember, they were basically around 500, meandering around the 500 mark, and then all of a sudden they just ripped off I think it was 6 or 7 wins down the stretch and right into the playoffs where they had that massive upset. Wasn't so massive for me because I did take Montreal plus the points against Toronto in the East Final last year, and it was that shocking result, Will, where Chad Kelly was everyone's unanimous most outstanding player last year in the CFL. He had an incredible season at the quarterback spot for the Argos. And all of a sudden, in the East Final, Montreal makes him look terrible. He had, 2-3 interceptions, couple pick sixes. He was just totally out of sync. He was inaccurate the whole day. That defensive front and the pass rush for the Alouettes made life just miserable for him. And the Alouettes ended up not only beating Toronto outright, as they were almost a double-digit underdog in that game, but they ended up winning comfortably. Like, that game was not even up for grabs down the stretch. That's how dominating Montreal was in that game. And then right in front of my own eyes, live and in person, Will, at Tim Hortons Field here in Hamilton, where the Grey Cup was last year, I got to see Montreal-Winnipeg, and it was a great football game. It was one of the better Grey Cups. It was back and forth. Montreal was toe-to-toe, blow for blow with the Bombers, start to finish. I think it was one of the best performances I've seen out of, obviously, a guy that's had some ups and downs in his CFL career, and Cody Fajardo at quarterback, who I thought played well. But again, the defense got all the key stops. They got enough pressure on Zach Collaros in that game, and the Alouettes got the touchdown drive. They needed a drive late. They got it, and they ended up winning 28-24, winning the Grey Cup over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and another upset because, once again, they were the underdog in that game. So Montreal was amazing down the stretch. Question is that just a red-hot finish to the season, or is this a team that's going to put together a more complete body of work, and be strong start to finish this year as opposed to just catch fire late in the season? So that's something to monitor. You look at the East Division, Chad Kelly's situation in Toronto, 9-game suspension. So he's gone for a while. Cameron Dukes is now the quarterback with the Argos for the first 9 games. They lose a couple of key pieces. They lose a lot on defense. I will say that, Toronto, including their defensive coordinator, Corey Mace, who's now in Saskatchewan. So lots of change there. My Ticats, they could be 6-12 this year, and they could be a 10-plus win team if Bo Levi Mitchell stays healthy and plays well. If the O-line can protect him, which is a big question. If the new receivers outside of Tim White can step up. And, of course, if the defense can play a lot better than they did at times last year. And then, of course, you got Ottawa, the Red Blacks, your old team, where it was a nightmare last year, but they've put their hope behind Drew Brown, who learned behind Zach Collaros, one of the best in Winnipeg. And then out west, you've got BC and Winnipeg, probably again entering the season, Will, as the top two teams on paper in the West. And it's going to be a matter of who's good enough to join them from the three teams that all have flaws behind them. Edmonton, can they take a step forward? Calgary didn't have a great year. Questions about Jake Mayer, their quarterback. Can they take a step forward? Saskatchewan, injuries, coaching issues. There's Craig Dickinson. There was a lot of criticism for him last year down the stretch. Terrible defense. They were down without Trevor Harris, who got injured. Their season kind of fell apart. But now, they make a lot of changes. Bring in A.J. Ouellette. The O-line's better. Harris is healthy. They've got a coach that has apparently brought a family atmosphere already to training camp in Saskatchewan, and Corey Mace. So there's optimism there. So many great storylines with all 9 teams really coming into the CFL season. So before we get into the 4-week 1 game specifically, Will, just an initial thought. What's something that you're looking for going into the new season, and a team or a player or a situation that you're excited to see? How's this going to unfold?
Yeah, well, first off, you're on fire. Great summary. Hit on a lot of good points there and touched on a lot.
Quick hitter too. All 9 teams. I said something. Yeah.
Yep. And you mentioned at the beginning, and I think that's the great thing about the CFL, and people that are fans of the CFL can really understand this, where each year creates great hope and also parity and uncertainty coming into a new year. A lot can change. The deck shuffles a little bit more than maybe you're used to in like the NFL. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these things play out. You start with coach and quarterback, and then you can get a good piece of where an organization and a team is going to go. But that said, I think the East is interesting in terms of all of the different quarterback situations. Montreal, I probably would agree with you on the fact that it was probably more of the latter, that they wanted a heater last year, but they seem to really like what they did. They made an emphasis to bring all of their guys back and keep that culture and that continuity there, which is a big deal, especially early in the season. And in Ottawa, same head coach, but underneath all of that, some changes. So there's going to be a different look, and it's a new system with Tommy Condell, linking back up with Jeremiah Masoli. But then what's the element with Drew Brown and a new system, and all of the things that go into that. So a lot of changes in Ottawa, but I do like some of the things that they're doing there. But maybe it takes a little bit of time to get that going. Going to Hamilton, Bo Levi seems to just be a wild card. I don't really know what to expect with the health and where he's at.
That makes 2 of us.
With his age. Yeah. But I got to tell you, someone that's not as familiar, Scott Milanovich is a heck of a football coach. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see them do some really good things. And they have a very good culture in Hamilton. It's a very winning football organization. They do things the right way. You hear great things from, at least I've heard from players about how much they like it there, how much, the team is invested in its players and the culture there. So there's that. And then Toronto, right? It was probably the most talented roster, in the league on paper, but just with the uncertainty at quarterback and, having Cameron Dukes be the guy to now step in for the first half of the season, that's a big deal. And I think, in my opinion, it might set them back into a little bit of a hole, as much as I believe in Ryan Dinwiddie and his abilities, to be a former quarterback and get guys going. And, I was wrong on Chad Kelly last year early. I didn't have a ton of faith, or didn't see it, being one of the top quarterbacks in the CFL, and he was awesome last year. So maybe he can work some of that magic with Cameron Dukes, but at the same time, the spunk and the fire that he shows, I don't know if that's going to be sustainable for an entire half of the football season. So there's those elements in the East. And then in the West, you got your 2 big dogs in BC and Winnipeg, where we kind of think we know what we're going to get. A lot of continuity, a lot of guys that are, stay together in the offseason. So you expect them to hit the ground running. But then, a team like Edmonton, with bringing in McLeod Bethel Thompson and Chris Jones, with all of the changes that, he will make as a GM and a head coach. So that's the big wild card for me, is Edmonton and what they do and some of the weapons they've brought in. Now Chris Jones had a couple of years to kind of get things settled after a lot of turnover for the organization and cap issues and organizational issues. So maybe things have settled a little bit there. So, for each team has their own, Calgary being like the Patriots of the CFL. You get a lot of really, storied and respected guys on that team. So every team should have a renewed sense of hope, and I'm excited to watch what happens.
Yeah, it's like I say, every team is going to come in with optimism to a new season, especially in a 9-team league. It's not one of these deals where, in NHL and NBA specifically, you feel like you're going to have to spend 3 or 4 years rebuilding before you're contending again. Not in this league. You can go from worst to first and vice versa
Yeah.
very easily, very quickly as well here in the CFL. And it wouldn't shock me if one of these, poorest teams last year make a huge step forward and one of the top teams from last year comes tumbling down. So, it'll be interesting to see which teams those are. Let's get into week one. We will start with the first game. Now, this game is going to be on CBS Sports Network in the U.S. They've got the national television rights to the CFL now in the States, and all the games that aren't on CBS Sports Network are streamed on the CFL website, CFL.ca. So they are the second year now that the CBS Sports Network is the rights holders, because it used to be ESPN and their networks, but they ended up not renewing the rights, and CBS got it. So this will be on CBS Sports Network in the States. It's Montreal and Winnipeg. Blue Bombers 7.5-point home favorites here, 48 being the total in this game. Look, Winnipeg, great, the stalwart in the West Division, 4 straight Grey Cup appearances, 2-2 in those games. But West Division champions 4 straight years. Tough to, ever say that, they're not going to have a great season. But this is the first time I've got real questions and concerns coming into the season for Winnipeg. I know they were 14-4 last year in the regular season, but suddenly you look at the O-line, and Jamarcus Hardrick, who was a big key O-lineman for them, has gone to Saskatchewan. It was a great signing for the Rough Riders. Stanley Bryant's incredible on the left tackle spot, but he's getting up there in age. Pat Neufeld, a lot of those guys on that O-line are, they've seen a lot of snaps in their career. Can they maintain and sustain that high level with, being in sync? The timing's got to be right. The protections, being able to execute all those at a high level. That's going to, and continuing to be a good run block. And that's another thing they've had, Will, all these years, Winnipeg, a great run blocking O-line. You can say all you want how great a running back Andrew Harris was for them years ago, and how great Brady Oliveira has been for them the last couple of years, but they're not great running backs without a great run-blocking O-line unit, and Winnipeg has certainly had that. Yards per carry, they've always been at or near the top in the CFL these last several years, but the O-line's, a little bit older. A lot of the players on this team are a little bit older. I think that, and especially in the trenches. Look at the other side, Will, defensive line for them. Willie Jefferson's older. Jackson Jeffcoat retires, the other big pass rusher they add as well. They lose one of their, I believe, interior defensive linemen as well that departed in the offseason as well. So suddenly there's some shakeups there. Ricky Walker, that's who left. Adam Bighill's on the 6-game injury list, to begin the season. And he's anchored the linebacking core for years here with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And so there's going to be a little bit of change there at that position. And then the secondary, I like a few other. I like Evan Holm. That guy really played well last year. Young guy that stepped up, but DeMario Houston's not there anymore. Brandon Alexander's still very good in terms of a defensive back on this team, but he had some injury issues last year. Can he maintain health? So in the trenches, and especially at linebacker without Big Hill, there's question marks in terms of an aging unit a little bit. And will the young faces be able to step up, including in the secondary? So the defense really is where most of the question marks are, and you could say a couple on the O-line. What you can't question, Will, is the skill position talent. It's still, fucking incredible on this team how many great players they've got. Explosive playmakers, dynamic players. I mean, it starts with Oliveira at running back, but look at this receiving core. They bring back the same guys that have just been amazing here these last couple of years. Dalton Schoen, he's back. Nick Dembski, he's back. Kenny Lawler, he's back. It's just Drew Wolotarski. Don't sleep on him. He's a really good receiver too. Drew Wolotarski, kid out of Minnesota. I mean, they still are loaded at receiver. They've got the best running back in the league probably right now. And of course, you got Zach Collaros pulling the trigger still at quarterback. And, he's 34, 35 now, but I think he's still got a few good years in him. He absolutely does. I'm not concerned about age catching up to him nearly as much. So that's Winnipeg. Montreal, on the flip side, you look at their roster coming into the season. Yes, Cody Fajardo obviously had a great finish to the season, but he was maddeningly inconsistent. I'm not as concerned about the receiving core without Mac, who ended up going to the NFL. getting signed there because Tyler Snead, the East Carolina product, stepped up. They've got Tyson Philpott, who was very good last year. Don't forget, Keon Julian Grant got injured last year, and he was starting to show some real flash at receiver for Montreal, and now he's back too. So the big one is William Stanback's gone. He's in BC now, so it's going to be Jeshrin Antwi, Walter Fletcher, and my former Ticat, Sean Thomas Erlington, splitting the running back job here for Montreal. One thing about Montreal, though, their O-line is still, I think, the area that could be a little concerning coming into the season, but the defense is loaded. The defense was spectacular late in the season. They come into this season. Marc-Antoine Dequoy probably established himself as one of the premier safeties. You've got Derek Wigan, Antonio Moultrie on the defensive line, Avery Ellis. It's a really strong unit there. And then at the linebacker spot, you got Darnell Sankey, who I know they got from Saskatchewan, anchoring that group. Beveret's a good player. That's a really good defense. That's a really, really strong defense, really in all three levels for the Montreal Alouettes. And it's a defense that completely shut down Chad Kelly and the Argos in the playoffs last year. And then they're a big reason why they got the key stops when they needed in the Grey Cup win against Winnipeg as well. So the fact they got Adeyemi Berglund, Dylan Wynn too from the Ticats they add, Derek Wigan, like I said, that D-line's good. So that defense is good. But if you actually look at the injury report going into week one here, there are a couple pieces of that defense that are going to be missing, it looks like, for the Montreal Alouettes, because it looks like Dylan Wynn, who they got from the Ticats, is going to be out. And then a couple of players in the secondary, Arthur Hamlin, Wesley Sutton, and Wesley Sutton's been here for a long time. They're both going to be out here for Montreal. So the defense on paper is good, really good, but they do have a couple key injuries coming into week one here against Winnipeg that could hurt them a little bit. I definitely this outline opened 6, and when it was at 6, I did take some Winnipeg. I thought less than, because look, this game's triple circled on their schedule. I mean, you just know it is after losing in the Grey Cup to this Montreal team. Grey Cup revenge, if you will. But then Montreal is hurting a little bit on defense. You got to play this Winnipeg team on the road, where that's never an easy environment. But now it's 7.5 with the line moving toward the Bombers here, 6 up to 7.5. I'm a little bit, I'd pump the brakes a little bit now. I mean, this is still a very capable Montreal team that's now getting more than a touchdown now in the underdog role. I think if you got the good number, that's fine. I think if you like Winnipeg now, consider teasing them down. You could put them on -1.5 on a 6-point teaser, or throw them in a parlay piece of some kind. But at -7.5, I'd be a little bit more leery. The total, I go back and forth, because to me, Winnipeg starting the season, I trust their offense more than their defense. But at the same point in time, I think Montreal is kind of the reverse, where I trust their defense more than their offense, and think they could be more of an under team with totals this year. That being said, 2 of their bigger pieces on defense are out for this game. So that could go against the Alouettes here a little bit. So I would lean over a little bit. And Winnipeg, sometimes when they get up, and they're usually good for 28 points, 30 at home, they might be able to get that. And if you get 17 from Montreal, that's probably the 48 plus that you need for the total. So I'd lean over. I don't love it, but I would lean over. I liked Winnipeg initially, 7.5. I would probably look to, pare them down a little bit, either in a 6-point teaser or money line at the current price in this one. But I definitely wouldn't want to step in front of Winnipeg here, Will, because of the home field, because of the revenge angle, losing in the Grey Cup to Montreal, and my thought that maybe, just maybe, Montreal might regress just a little bit after the way they went red hot down the stretch last season en route to the Grey Cup. Will, what do you think here? CFL season opener, Alouettes, Bombers.
Yeah, I mean, what a storyline, right? Like you mentioned, Winnipeg probably having this game on their mind all off season, and it's triple circled, and a chance to really, redeem themselves and start off the season with, with a purpose and with a bang. You did such a good job covering the players. I'll zoom out a little bit. There were some, departures like, for Montreal, Mac that you'd mentioned, having been in Ottawa.
Austin Mac, by the way. I blanked on his first name, Austin Mac. I was saying Mac, Austin Mac. There you go.
Yep. Having been in Ottawa, I know the personnel guys they have in Montreal, they're going to do a great job of bringing in talent. And they match up very well. And, Winnipeg, it's the same group. They seem to be running back. It feels like, maybe is that Are those players' best years behind them? Maybe, but it's week one. They're fresh. They got a lot to prove. So that matchup is going to be interesting. I'm really interested to see the matchup of the coordinators. On Winnipeg, there's two great executioners of their systems in Buck Pierce and the defensive coordinator
You
is
won,
going to
you won
at the
for
moment.
Winnipeg this year, Will. Richie Hall is no
Richie
longer
Hall, yes.
the DC. Not this year,
Yes.
though. He's no longer there. It's Jordan Younger, actually.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I did not
DC.
know that. So my apologies to the
All right.
fans. But
That's okay.
I imagine he's a branch, off that block, having
Yep.
had a lot of the same people in the building there. And then you got on the other side from stories I've always heard in the CFL with Jason Moss and Noel Thorpe. Those are the guys that are the mad scientists. They're in their offices all offseason looking for wrinkles, drawing up crazy stuff. What do you think about this idea? And then running with it. So seeing how those two things, because it's week one, you're ready to unleash all your new gadgets and tricks and shots and stuff. So I'm really interested to see how those two dynamics play into each other. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to go against Winnipeg at home. This is not a neutral site. A lot to prove. Veteran players. But at the same time, like you mentioned, like 7.5 points is a lot. And this Montreal team has, championship pedigree, and they've proven that last year. So very interested to see how it works out. And then, one of the things to remember, underneath all of those Winnipeg weapons is they got Chris Streveler hiding at QB2. And, I'm sure they got some gadgets waiting to unleash him as well. But yeah, going back to Zach Collaros, and I've always admired his game and his CFL experience from afar. His game is going to age well, so I don't think that's going to be anything that's going to look to hinder him this coming season.
I don't know if I'm very frustrated. Some of the books I'm looking at don't have Tyler Snead props for Montreal receiver, because I think Tyler Snead was one of Cody Fajardo's go-to guys down the stretch when they went on that red-hot run. I'd be interested in receptions and receiving yards over for him tomorrow night, because I think he's definitely someone that they'll be looking at quite a bit because of the great chemistry they had down the stretch of the regular season and the playoffs en route to winning that Grey Cup last year. So that's definitely something you want to keep in mind. All right, Friday night football tonight, Hamilton, Calgary. Looking forward to that. Hamilton, 1-point road favorites, 45 the total. This game at McMahon Stadium in Calgary. I already made the prediction, and for those of you that haven't seen it yet, I did the CFL season preview show earlier this week. It's right here on the channel. Make sure you check that out. But I already said it on that show. Calgary Stampeders, my choice to be the worst team in the CFL this season, to bring up the rear, to be even worse than Will's former team, the Ottawa Red Blacks, and others. That's where I think Calgary is right now. I've got to see more out of Jake Mayer before I'm confident in him, at the quarterback spot. You know how many times that guy threw for less than 200 yards last year? 15 interceptions last year. Considering you're starting 18 games if you're healthy every game, usually minimum 15, 16. Throwing that many interceptions is not good. That's not what you want to see. So he's got to shore up the decision making. I think he's got to go through his progressions more. Too many times he was locking in on one receiver, and that's so many of his pick sixes last year were that. And look, every quarterback gets into that rut every now and then, especially when they're struggling with their confidence, right? Stare down a receiver. It's the thing you are always taught not to do, but it's sometimes the thing you end up doing, especially when your confidence is shattered a little bit. And I think we saw that last year, Will, from Jake Mayer a few too many times. Then to make matters worse, their O-line was way down from where it's been. Calgary's been known for churning out, Will, these just elite offensive lines every year, going back to when Bo was there all those years. Just great O-lines. Keep the quarterback upright. Let running backs like John Cornish and Kadeem Carey and all these great running backs they've had in Calgary over the years just run amok, and they just don't have the O-line quality anymore. Certainly not last year they did, and on paper I don't love the look of it going into this year. And then their best weapon at receiver, Malik Henry, who suffered injuries last year. This is just brutal. I don't care if you love the Stamps or you hate the Stamps. If you're a football fan, you feel for him and you feel for the team. That he gets injured in training camp and out for the season, Malik Henry. Just brutal. You would not wish that on your mortal enemy. I certainly wouldn't. That's just awful. And like I said, we wish him well in recovery. But there goes a guy that was expected to be one of the best receivers. Now, they still do have Mark and Michelle, who came back from the NFL last year. They still have Reggie Bagleton. So there are still some good weapons here for Calgary, but not having Henry hurts. I don't think losing Kadeem Carey is a big deal at running back because Dedrick Mills showed you last year that he's serviceable, but the O-line's a question, and Jake Mayer's an even bigger question. And that's concerning. And that's why part of the reason why I don't think Calgary is on par with, especially the other teams in the West, who we will get to in a minute. But I will say this, for as anti-Calgary as I am, who the fuck knows what Hamilton's going to be like this year? I'll be the first to admit I'm a Ticat fan, and I don't know what the hell this team is going to be or how they're going to play coming into week one. What I do know is they've made a lot of changes. Scott Milanovic is now the head coach, and he's a winner. You know, he's been coordinator in this league, won a Grey Cup, twice as a coordinator, once as a head coach with the Argos. He works well with quarterbacks. He's worked well with Bo Mitchell. Can Bo Levi Mitchell step on the field and not A, stay healthy, which is a huge if, and B, play at a high level, which is also a big if. But if he's ever motivated, Will, to have a huge night and a big-time performance, it would be here, because this is the first trip back to Calgary to face his old team, the Stampeders, since Bo Levi Mitchell signed in Hamilton prior to last year. Because don't forget, they only played each other once last year, the Ticats and Stamps. And the game was in Hamilton, and Bo Levi Mitchell was out due to injury at the time. So he has not faced Calgary since joining the Ticats. This will be that first trip back. So you know anyone's fired to beat up their former team, whether it ended on a positive note or it didn't. You still want to go back, and you want to hand it to the former team and show them that they miss you. And there's no doubt that Bo Levi Mitchell is going to have that mindset here on Friday night. Hamilton, Tim White getting him re-signed was huge. They like a lot of these young kids that they have at receiver as well. Bridges in particular was very, very impressive in training camp. I'm fascinated to see how he ends up playing for them. No doubt about that. I thought he was very, very impressive for the Ticats. He did drop a pass when in the game I was at, the preseason home game, but overall, he was making some incredible catches. You know what's very interesting, too, is they've got a guy that's really played well in the second preseason game, the Ticats, and he played well enough that they're starting to think, you know what? He could end up being someone that is a big-time, receiver for us and a starting receiver, and that's Quintez Patton, who's a guy that was with the Indianapolis Colts organization for a bit. Now he is here with the Hamilton Ticats, and I'm telling you, he was very, very impressive, I thought, in the preseason. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can maintain a starting receiver spot. You know, they made a nice additions in the secondary. Unfortunately, one of them, Jamal Peters, who they got from the Argos, terrific secondary defensive back, but injured and out for this game, so they will miss him. It looks like James Butler, too, who's a great running back for the Ticats, starting back, may also miss, but he's questionable for this game. Look, this isn't going to be one of these deals where every week on this show, because I'm a Ticat season ticket holder and fan, that I'm going to bet the Ticats and recommend the Ticats. I do like them here, and all I'll say is, because I'm just so anti-Calgary, this is not me being Homer, by the way. I would have bet any team against Calgary here in this spot, because I'm very anti-Stampeders. I don't love the defense fell apart, too, for the Stampeders in the second half of the year. And I worry about their pass rush. I worry about their secondary. Jonathan Moxey, who they used to have in the secondary, is now with my Ticats. So there's another guy that if he's in the lineup, he'll want to stick it to his old team. And Dave Dickinson kind of lost his fastball this year. And I got to admit, I'm very concerned when he hires his brother. And I get it. It's his brother. It's family. You try to make room for your brother on the coaching staff. I get all that. But Craig Dickinson, it was a bad run for him down the stretch last year in Saskatchewan with timeouts and game management and clock management and personnel decisions. It was rough for Craig Dickinson with that Saskatchewan team. Will this be a positive addition to Dave Dickinson's coaching staff? I don't know, because to me, if it's based on qualifications and merit, I'll come out and say it. I think there's better people for the job. But, hey, he's my bro. I got to bring him in here and bring him on as my one of my assistants. So I get why he's doing it. Craig Dickinson is Dave's brother, but I didn't love the coaching job Craig did at all. And nobody did, quite honestly, in Saskatchewan last year. So I'd worry about that a bit. This might be a little bit of a coaching staff advantage as well for the Ticats. So I'm going to take them here at around to pick them. Now, I am worried about some of these injuries. Peters is out. They've got one of their linebackers out. Of course, Butler's questionable, but I still think even with those question marks, this is a winnable game for them. I don't think highly of Calgary. So I'll take Hamilton here. And I like the under here in this game. I think it's going to be, Calgary's offense didn't light the world on fire last year. Hamilton with Bo, more of a dink and dunk passer now. Can he still stretch the field with the deep ball? Sure. But I'm probably going to need to see him do it before I'm ready to buy into it. So I do think you're going to see long, time-consuming, sustained drives, probably a good amount of 2-and-outs here, really on both sides, especially early in the game. So this one I would lean under the total, a lower scoring affair here with the Ticats and the Stamps. So, Will, what do you think here on Friday night, Hamilton, Calgary?
Yeah, another great storyline. Going off of what you were saying about Bo Levi Mitchell, something that's always been a thing for him the last couple of years has been his health. And I think that this is a good opportunity for him. Obviously, he wants to go into Calgary and, play well against his old team, but he should have everything lined up to go into this game healthy and fresh and be at his best, because he hasn't played any real contact football yet in order to, be dinged up or have issues or the wear of the season on him. So, I tend to lean towards Hamilton here. I like both coaching staffs. I think both, bring a lot of expertise and a lot of brain power. And but I go back to what you were saying in the beginning. I'm not crazy about Calgary's roster on paper. There's not a lot, in my opinion, to get excited about. And I think Bo is going to play with an edge and he's going to be fresh. And so if that's the deciding factor, I'll lean in that direction. But yeah, definitely some key guys out for Hamilton, which is a cause for concern. But week one, the guy should be prepared, and I think Scott Milanovich is gonna have these guys ready to play.
All right, Hamilton and Will liking my Ticats as well. Like I said, I'm worried about the Ticats a little bit schedule-wise after this week, because they're playing Saskatchewan back-to-back, and we'll get to the Riders next up. I think they're a lot better this year, Saskatchewan. So those two games aren't going to be easy. And then if I'm not mistaken, they play Winnipeg after that. So this is definitely a little bit of a challenging. After this week, it's a much more challenging schedule for the Hamilton Ticats. It's actually Ottawa, then BC for the Ticats. It's BC, not Winnipeg. I knew there was another tough team in there, but yeah. So it's a tough schedule after this one. So got to get this one, in my opinion, because this is probably one of the weaker teams you'll face first month of the season. All right, we move to Saturday, and this game has been moved up to 4:00 p.m. Eastern time. Saturday afternoon. It was going to be Saturday night, but guess what's happening Saturday night? The Edmonton Oilers are playing game one of the Stanley Cup final. So they didn't want and you got to be absolute moron to put the Elks game at the same time as the Oilers Stanley Cup final game one. So it was the only decision to make. Move this game to the afternoon, and they did that. Rough Riders and Elks on Saturday afternoon. Edmonton, 1.5-point home favorites. Commonwealth Stadium, 46.5 the total. You look at Edmonton. Chris Jones, man, it's the same shit again. For the third straight year, it's like he's completely rebuilding and recycling and funneling in all kinds of new faces on defense again. He basically, last year he had a bunch of new faces on defense, and they were terrible early in the season on defense. Now, they did get better later in the season, but he's basically doing the same thing. Out with the old, in with the new. There's just a ton of new faces all over the defense, whether it's the D-line, linebacking core, secondary. And again, when you're talking about that much personnel roster change and turnover, Will, you know that playing the sport, how difficult it can be to get the chemistry and everybody on the same page right away. It can be very, very difficult, especially on that side of the football, where communication is very important for success. So again, that definitely would concern me about Edmonton. Here's what concerns me too. I know I said this on the preview show, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I'll say it again. Edmonton felt Trey Ford needed a mentor this year. I don't get it. Like, I watched this man take over the quarterback spot for the second half last year when Taylor Cornelius was struggling. And finally, Chris Jones, who I think's had something against Trey Ford, quite honestly, from the very, he's not given Trey Ford the keys to the limousine or the keys to the car very easily. He's really made Trey Ford work more than I think he should have to get a crack at starting at quarterback for them. But finally, he gets the gig. I thought he played well. He's an incredible athlete. He's an electrifying talent in terms of his ability to break the pocket. When the pocket collapses, he can make incredibly accurate throws on the run, move with his feet, and still make great plays. And he was playing great for the Elks down the stretch. Now, did he have some bad moments too? I think he's got to work on his steady in the pocket accuracy. I do think there's some truth to that. But there's no doubt he electrified Edmonton. And he's the reason they went on that he's a big part of the reason why they went on that run down the stretch after that 0 for start. And now all of a sudden they decide, well, let's bring in McLeod Bethel Thompson, who spent a year out of the CFL and the USFL with the New Orleans Breakers, a couple of years ago, because we think Trey needs a mentor. Well, this guy's been mentored for a couple of years now. He's been sitting behind one quarterback after another that's been a subpar quarterback, waiting for his chance. He finally shows you what he can do. And now you think he needs another friggin' mentor? Give me a break. Give him the chance. Give him the real shot from day one of training camp to say, this is your team now, Trey. We believe in you. Let's give you the shot. If you want to bring in McLeod Bethel Thompson, fine. But I just don't know why they were so quick to award him the starting spot instead of Trey. The only way they were probably going to sign him was promising him that he was probably going to start. But I think it's just a peculiar move. Now, MBT, it was great a couple of years ago in terms of yards. I get it. But, the playoff game was kind of up and down. And I know they won the Grey Cup. He got injured, and Chad Kelly had to take over and save the day. But I just don't think it was necessary to go for another quarterback when I think Trey Ford's got that potential to be their guy. But they're still hesitant on believing it, themselves.
You mind if I chime in?
Sure, go ahead. Absolutely.
So this is the part, hopefully I can bring some value to our listeners and the fans of the league. So I would totally agree. As someone that played quarterback and coached quarterbacks in the CFL, you watch it from afar, and Trey Ford checks a lot of the boxes that you're looking for. And he's a gamer. He's one of those guys where it's like you roll him out there and he just kind of gets it done. Is it a little unorthodox and maybe a little ugly at times? But he's got a really good feel for just playing football. Yeah. Now, where a lot of people are frustrated because he's not getting a real shot at it. A big part of professional football is coaches being able to trust you. They're putting their lives and their reputation and their jobs and their reputation online when they roll you out there. And I bet a big part of why he hasn't gotten the shot that maybe people feel he deserves is, my guess is, he's probably not showing it in practice, where it scares coaches to roll him out there because you're not getting confirmation on it during the week. But he's such a good just gamer of a football player. The times that you have been giving him a chance to run with it, he's making it work. But It's hard for an organization to wrap their arms around something when they don't feel like they see it on a day-to-day basis. So when you have the opportunity to go get an MBT and you can, get some insurance on your job as a coach or your organization, that everyone's going to be able to be steady Eddie, regardless of maybe how the rest of the team comes together. That's my best guess on having coached and played, that they're probably just not seeing it behind closed doors consistently. Their flashes, absolutely, I'm sure. It's hard. Pro football is hard, especially pro quarterback. So I'm just thinking that's probably what they're seeing, and they're not willing to wrap their arms and mortgage their potential future around him.
He is a veteran, McLeod Bethel Thompson. I will say that, but I'm worried for him here. Toronto, he had a great O-line. He has an okay O-line here in Edmonton, and he needs protection. McLeod Bethel Thompson's oftentimes a statue in the pocket. Doesn't have that mobility. So it's good pass protection. Is Edmonton going to be able to give that to MBT consistently here? That's going to be a big question. The defense, like I said, wasn't good at all last year. Only Saskatchewan in the West gave up more points than Edmonton last year. And there's a lot of new faces here. And look, Saskatchewan's defense was terrible down the stretch last year. Terrible. But they did make some improvements. They brought in some talent. They have a DC, or a guy that did a great job as DC in Toronto, now as their head coach, and Corey Mace. The question for Saskatchewan is going to be, that defense will get better. Like, that defense in September and October compared to right now, will be better. The question is, how quickly will it be better in Saskatchewan? And how quickly can the additions they made really help this team out? I love the offense. Trevor Harris is healthy, and I know this because he's a friend, and directly from him, I've heard it. He is working as hard as a human can work in the offseason to get back from the injury, working with a quarterback coach to get the ball out of his hands quicker, alter his throwing motion a little bit, make it a little more compact and a little more explosive. He's done all that. He is extremely motivated. He feels he's got a couple of good years in him at least, even though he's 38, my age right now. He is a supremely motivated son of a gun. And he looks about as fleet of foot and in good shape as he can be at his age right now. No doubt about it. He's really worked hard in the offseason. He's got an O-line that's better because they bring in Jamarcus Hardrick, who's been an all-star O-lineman his whole career from Winnipeg. This O-line's been in shambles. It's funny. I did the Super Bowl preview show with Trevor, Will, in February. On the show, I told him to his face that your offensive line has stunk the last 2 years. And I know he couldn't say anything because he doesn't want to throw any teammates under the bus. I get it. But I told him, like, the O-line for Saskatchewan's been almost embarrassing at times the last 2 years, but not anymore, at least not on paper. I think they have really, really improved that offensive line this year. Peter Godber's on that offensive line. Philip Blake. These are good players. And now Hardrick as well. This should be the best Saskatchewan offensive line in years. They bring in A.J. Ouellette, who is an incredible running back with Toronto. A.J. Ouellette was so good in Toronto last year. That's why Andrew Harris was riding the pine. It's more because A.J. Ouellette was that good. He was that tremendous. And so Saskatchewan brings him in. Incredible addition to the offense because he's one of those guys that he's a physical runner. He breaks first contact, tough to bring down in the open field, and he's got underrated wheels. Underrated speed. When that guy gets a full head of steam and there's no one around him, he can get to top flight pretty quickly. And that's what's impressive about a guy of his stature, A.J. Ouellette. So I love the addition at running back with him. And then they've got a lot of good weapons at receiver. Samuel Emelis, Sean Bain, I think, is going to have a huge year with Trevor at receiver. They've got weapons too. I think their offense is going to be really good. The question is going to be how quickly can Mace mold that defense, and they'll be better. Will it be right away is the question. I'm sticking with Saskatchewan here. I mean, we're talking about a team in Edmonton that didn't win their first game until September, just about, and here they are as favorites, first game of the year. And they had that brutal long, multiple season spanning home losing streak as well that got snapped last year. So I think Saskatchewan might end up being the better team this year, so I'll gladly take them as an underdog. And I like the over here because I definitely think both offenses will be ahead of the defenses here, first game of the season. Will, what do you think here? Rough Riders, Elks.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like the Riders, and I think you hit a lot of key points. I will just highlight one more, or even more, one of the things that you mentioned about the home game element for Edmonton. I think you're probably going to get a lighter than normal turnout, so you're not going to get the same element of the disadvantage of playing on the road because the Oilers are going to be king in town for what they got going on, especially the same day. And you're probably going to get a lot of Riders that are going to be in there. It might even be like a 50-50 split.
They always
home attendance has been, and then just proximity to Saskatchewan. So I don't think the road dynamics is really much of a thing here at all. And I really like what the Riders have been able to build and put together. And I think they got a lot of momentum. And I think you'll probably see that on display week one. Edmonton, I think they're the biggest wild card of the year, in my opinion. But again, with all of the newness, that might be something they're not able to put together early in the season. So I'm with you. I like the Riders here and a lot of the things they got going on.
No doubt. And like I said, that Saskatchewan defense was bad last year, but so was Edmonton's. And I just feel as the course of the season goes on, Corey Mace being there, that defense will get better as the season goes on. I don't know if they'll be great here because it might take them time, but I still think they're a better defense roster-wise right now on paper than Edmonton. And I think that's going to be the difference. This, I think, will be a high-scoring game. Both teams should get their points. I see this being like 27-24 for somebody, but I think it'll be a close game. But I think that team that gets that key stop late in the game is going to be Saskatchewan. And I think Corey Mace is a big reason for that because there's no doubt he's well thought of as a coach. He's well respected. He commands respect. He treats the players sternly but fairly. And he's really gotten a more family, tight-knit group type of environment going with Saskatchewan here in training camp. And I think that is also going to bode well for them here in this game and moving forward. in the rest of the season as well. No doubt. All right, final game for week 1, and it is the BC Lions and the Toronto Argonauts. Sunday night football, CFL style. This game will be on CBS Sports Network. BC 5.5-point road favorites, 47.5 the total. I think it was 5 years ago the last time BC won in Toronto, and they won that game by a single point. So my first thought is you're not getting a bargain with BC here. They're laying 5.5 on the road in the first game of the year, but you're getting that price on them because they've devalued odds makers Toronto in the betting markets because of being without Chad Kelly for 9 games this year. The question you got to ask yourself, is it too much of an adjustment downward that they've made on Toronto? Considering that Kelly's out, can Cameron Dukes play at a high level? They don't need Cameron Dukes to be Chad Kelly. They don't expect him to be Chad Kelly. They just need him to make the throws that are there, rely on the run game, which now is Kadeem Carey, who they brought in from Calgary. The O-line was pretty good opening up holes for the run game last year with A.J. Ouellette, and even though he's gone to Saskatchewan, that O-line should still be pretty solid as far as being a run-blocking unit. The key is going to be, can he avoid mistakes? Because this is still a rare start for him. I think he only started 1 game, maybe 2, all of last year. For the Argos. So he doesn't have a whole lot of pass attempts or starts in the CFL under his belt. So the key for him is going to be avoiding those mistakes against this BC Lions defense, which last year was incredible for the first half of the year, and then they fell apart. They didn't play anywhere close to as good the last several games of the year. And now they're without Matthew Betts, their sack leader, who went to the NFL. Signed there in the offseason, and deservedly so. I'm so happy for Matthew Betts. He's earned that opportunity to get a look in the NFL. So he's gone. How can they replace that sack yardage is going to be the question moving forward for BC. Their offense, there's even questions there for BC where Lucky Whitehead's gone. Dominique Rhymes has gone to Ottawa. Lucky Whitehead's no longer there. That was arguably their 2 best receivers. Keon Hatcher is on the injury list to begin the year. He was probably their 3rd best receiver. So suddenly that great, incredible depth of receiver BC had last year, they do have some question marks coming into the year. But I believe in Alex Hollins. He's very good. Javon Katoy, he's shown to be a good receiver for BC. I think those 2 in particular are very capable of stepping up and playing well, even though they've got a few other key receivers gone now. And, of course, they've got Vernon Adams Jr. at quarterback, and an excellent offensive line. Their O-line was great last year. They have 4 of their 5 starters back on the offensive line this year. That O-line should be fine, giving Vernon Adams, big play VA, as he's called, the time to throw the football down the field. And I think even without Whitehead and Rhymes, there's still enough talent at receiver in the cupboard here for the BC Lions to be able to make big plays. So in this game, I like the over a little bit, 47.5. I think Cameron Dukes could surprise some people. I don't think he'll be phenomenal, but I don't think he's going to be bad. Some people think he's going to be bad, lousy. I don't think so. I think he'll surprise some people. He played well against Winnipeg. Remember, there was a game against Winnipeg late in the regular season, Will. They rested Chad Kelly. Cameron Dukes started, and he played pretty well on the road in Winnipeg, and the Argos were very competitive, and the game meant nothing to them. And they were still pretty competitive, and Cameron Dukes played all right in that game in Winnipeg last year. So I think he can play a little bit better than people think. Couple that with BC's track record of really struggling, making the trip to Toronto. Again, they haven't won there in 5 years. They got blown out there actually last year. And that was a great BC team last year. So I think taking the 5.5 points with the home underdog here, the Toronto Argonauts, is the way I would go. It sounds disgusting that I'm saying that as a Ticat fan, but I would probably have to lean with the Argos here, plus 5.5. And I also think it can get up and over that total, 47.5 here in this game as well. Will, what do you think for the week 1 finale here, BC Toronto?
Yeah, I'll go all the way back to 2021 when I went to training camp with the BC Lions and I was with them for the offseason of 2020 and into 2021. And I've been a big fan of what they've been building over there. So I've been bullish on BC for a while, and I expect them to do some good things this year. One of the things with week 1, I think is going to come into play here. Vernon Adams does as good a job as any quarterback about having great off seasons and putting in time and making time for his guys, which is not something you always see in the CFL. So I think it's going to come to play here, and I expect BC to do some good things. I'm probably a little bit contrarian here. I'm a little less bullish on Toronto, just given all of the change at quarterback. And now that said, Ryan Dinwiddie's a great coach, and he'll get him ready. And Cameron Dukes has had a lot of time to prepare and know that he's a starter. And I like some of his moxie and stuff, but like I mentioned earlier, I don't think moxie is enough to to sustain lasting success. So I like BC here. I will say it does seem like they always seem to struggle whenever they come east and go on the grass in Toronto. But yeah, in this situation, I kind of like the under, and I like what BC's got going on. So I would lean in them if I had to pick one.
There we go. You know what that means? It's a BC and under lean for Will Arndt. It's a Toronto and over lean for me. It means guaranteed winner right here on the Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy show from this game. Someone's cashing when it comes to this one here with the Lions and the Argos. Yeah, I mean, definitely BC you would think on paper wins, but they're not laying a bargain. They're laying not just, a field goal. They're laying more than that. They've historically done very poorly in Toronto for years. And even last year here with a very good BC team, they ended up losing in Toronto. And then I just think Cameron, the one thing too about Dukes is, say what you will about whether you think he's got the ability to get the job done, and that's still up for debate. Even I don't know, is someone leaning to Toronto in this game. But the one thing he does have in his arsenal and on his side is that he knows the system. He knows the playbook. He was with them last year. It's still Ryan Dinwiddie, head coach / OC, calling the plays. That level of familiarity, Will, you can speak to this as a quarterback. That's got to help him at least to put him in a position to try and succeed in this game.
Yeah, definitely does. And they're gonna have him prepared as he can be. And on the other side of that, Vernon Adams, Jordan Meximick and Rick Campbell have had a lot of continuity together. And, I still like some of the playmakers that they have. So, all things being equal, I don't hate Toronto either. I would just lean a little bit more in BC's direction in this case.
Yeah, no doubt. That's fair enough. Fair comment. No question about that. And they do have a great coaching staff. Rick Campbell, you mentioned Jordan Meximick, the great offensive coordinator. And I think a guy that may not be DC and BC for much longer because he's going to get the next head coaching opportunity that comes around, and that's Ryan Phillips for the BC Lions, no doubt. I think he's on the short list of current coordinators that might make the jump to head coach sooner rather than later with the job Ryan Phillips has done with that defense as well for the BC Lions. All right, before we wrap up, just quickly, I'm just going to throw out rapid-fire opinions on the UFL conference championship game. Saturday, it's Michigan Panthers, Birmingham Stallions. Birmingham 4.5-point home favorites, 43 the total. Birmingham's the class of the league, but I'm telling you what, they haven't covered a point spread in several. They didn't look right. They looked uninspired down the stretch. Now they were resting some players too. I think Adrian Martinez will be available for this game, and I don't think I can bet against them because they could just flip the switch and it's the old Birmingham again. I worry about that because they have owned spring football the last 2 years under Skip Holtz, the head coach. But I don't know if I'm running the lay 4.5 with them. So I like over more than anything in that game. I think the Birmingham offense with Martinez under center will come back to life. Michigan played everybody under the sun at quarterback down the stretch. We saw some Josh Love out of San Jose State. We saw Danny Etling, the Purdue product. We saw Bryce Perkins, the Virginia quarterback. We saw like 3 different quarterbacks play for Michigan down the stretch. So who knows? Are we going to see one of them, 2 of them, all 3 of them during this game? But Perkins, Etling, Josh Love, you might be able to see all of them at some point for the Michigan Panthers in this game. So it's going to be interesting to see which quarterback they end up going with here in this game. But I think when you look at it here, Danny Etling did play well down the stretch here for the Michigan Panthers. And, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion it'll be Bryce Perkins by any stretch of the imagination. So I think it could be Etling at quarterback, and he was pretty solid down the stretch. But I've seen enough of Birmingham in spring football these last 2 years to know you don't stand in front of them, especially in the playoffs. And I know it's not Alex Magoo anymore, who was just incredible for them at quarterback. It's now Martinez. And, of course, they had Matt Corral as well, their other quarterback this year. But I just think they get the job done there against Michigan. And then San Antonio, St. Louis. The Brahmas and the Battlehawks and the other UFL conference championship game. St. Louis, 3-point home favorites, 43.5 the total. I think I got to side with St. Louis. AJ McCarron,
Yep.
Home field. It is one of the stronger home field environments in the UFL this year, that loud Edward Jones Dome, as they call it. They've gotten pretty good crowds there this year. I think that could be the difference in the end. Now, San Antonio is going to have the quarterback back that's been injured most of the year, and that's the Chase Garbers, who had missed much of the season for them, the kid out of Cal, but he hasn't played in a while. Will he be sharp? Will he be ready to go? And they do have a very good defense. Wade Phillips, who's the coach of the San Antonio Brahmas, they do have a very good defense. But the St. Louis defense, I think, has improved as the season's gone on. And I think at home, McCarron and the offense just hold a little bit of an edge over San Antonio's offense, especially when it's a bit of an unknown to me. I know he played well before his injury, Garbers, but that was a long time ago. Can he recapture that magic now that he's back from injury for this playoff game for San Antonio? I think that's still up in the air. So I would lean to St. Louis -3. This is one where I'd probably lean under a little bit because both defenses are pretty good, but I don't know if I'll touch the total. I definitely like the Battlehawks here -3. So you know what I might do is I might do St. Louis by itself -3, and then a smaller bet on a money line parlay, St. Louis and Birmingham, because I do think St. Louis and Birmingham is going to be your UFL championship game next weekend. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on those two UFL games. Did you get a chance, Will, to check out any UFL this year that it's been on? I know Fox and ESPN and ABC have shown all the games. Did you get a chance to watch any of that?
Yeah, a little bit. Being that I was invited to camp with Orlando in the XFL last year, and I got invited to the XFL Combine before that, I was curious to kind of see what the landscape of this new league would be. And I know a lot of, former teammates or guys that I know, from playing in and around the league. So I've always kept tabs on what they got going on. And I tend to agree with a lot of your insight there. I think in this case, go with what you know. And those two teams have good championship pedigree and continuity at quarterback, and they're healthy, and they've been in these positions before.
And it's Skip Holtz, who's, two spring football league iterations for Skip Holtz with that Birmingham Stallions team, 2 championships. So, it's not easy to go against those guys. And him in particular as a head coach. I know it's a different quarterback this time around. Adrian Martinez, not Alex Magoo anymore, but it's still, I think, a tremendous roster for spring football standards. D line's very good. And I think that's probably going to end up being the difference for Birmingham in that one. So I'm going to say Birmingham St. Louis is going to be your UFL championship game. Great stuff. We're going to wrap up the show now with best bet for me. We won't have Will give one, but I'll give one here. Best bet to wrap up the show. Saskatchewan, Edmonton. I'll go over 46.5. I do like that total quite a bit because I love the Riders' offense now with Trevor Harris back. And I think when you look at Edmonton, MBT can throw the ball. Say that. Can he get protected is the thing. I think they got tons of weapons. That's another thing I didn't mention about this game, Will, when we broke it down. Tons of weapons for Edmonton. That's definitely one thing you're not concerned about is the skill positions. Kevin Brown's a good running back. You got Geno Lewis and a great group of receivers for the Edmonton Elks. They got Kyron Moore. It's just a loaded receiving core as well. They got a lot of good weapons there. Geno Lewis healthy, Kyron Moore, Dylan Mitchell, Curly Gittens Jr. They bring him in, Will, from Toronto, and they played together, McLeod Bethel Thompson and Curly Gittens Jr. 2 years ago in Toronto. So they have that familiarity. So that's definitely the strength of Edmonton is that skill position group. Running backs and wide receivers, they've got weapons. And I think they'll be able to score some points here, but I think they'll give up a lot. It'll be a shootout. A lot of points, a lot of success, I think, for both offenses. So Riders Elks over 46.5 for my CFL Week 1 best bet. Will, it's been a blast. It's great to have you back on the show again. We'll definitely do this again throughout the course of the season. But fun to talk CFL football. We'll be talking NFL and college football closer to August, September when those get underway. But Will, it's never a bad day when you're able to talk football, is it?
No, definitely not. And yeah, as Ian mentioned, I'm not going to be giving any official bets, just given my proximity to, pro football and playing and coaching and stuff. So, but love to give some insight, love to talk football, and hopefully give you guys an inside look or a perspective on, the inner workings of, how this all works. So, Yeah, I'm with you. I'm excited for the CFL season to kick off, and I'm also excited for my NBA finals to start up tomorrow. Let's go.
Oh, you're right. NBA Finals. Who do you like there? Celtics and Mavs coming up. I think Dallas has a puncher's chance, quite honestly. I know Boston's going to have Porzingis back, and they didn't have him in the first 3 rounds. But I can also throw this at you, Will. Boston had faced Miami without Butler and Rozier in the first round. They faced Cleveland when Donovan Mitchell got banged up, and I don't think Jared Allen was fully healthy in that second round against Cleveland either. And then, of course, we saw what happened with Indiana. Tyrese Halliburton was laboring in that series, and Indiana lost 3 games in that series that they should have won. They should have won. They could have been up 3-1
It could have been.
after the first 4 games. They had 3 games in the palm of their hands, and they lost them all. Don't be fooled by the sweep. That was not a true blowout 4-0 sweep.
Mhm.
Indiana could have won 3 of those 4 games, and it's a totally different series if that happens. And again, you got Luka and Kyrie. You've had PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and so much of the supporting cast really step up and play well for them throughout the playoffs. I know it's not the supporting cast that Boston has or the depth that Boston has, but I'm saying Dallas gives Boston a very tough, very challenging series there starting tomorrow.
Yep. I'll be, as a fan, I'll be rooting for Dallas. Boston's had a cakewalk to the finals. There's no doubt, but they got a tremendous roster. They've been there. So they have every reason to go win this thing finally. But yeah, it's going to be fun to watch how Luka and Kyrie and the rest of that roster, go at these guys. Maybe they've overachieved a little bit to this point, but they certainly have played in a tougher conference and at a tougher road. So the element of the easier path versus in fresher versus been tested and been in tough games and had to really work for it. It'd be interesting to see how those two things come together.
It sure will. Looking forward to the NBA Finals, and clearly our guest here, Will Arndt, is as well. All right, I'm looking forward to CFL Week 1. I can't wait. We will be back next week here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy to break it all down again, recap Week 1, and we'll look forward to Week 2 next week as well on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy for our special guest, Will Arndt. I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great week. Enjoy CFL Week 1, and we will see you again next week for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.